Okay. Well, I thank you for inviting me tonight, everyone here and also everyone online. Can you hear well enough? Hopefully that's... No? Okay. Actually, I'm just as close as she was, really. Maybe you need to turn it up. Okay. Hello? Is that better? Okay, well, I can always... I'm really close to this, you know. I'll be swallowing it any second. Perhaps you can turn it up. Okay. Well, I'm doing my best here. No, it's not interfering. It's okay. All right, well, how's that? That's working. Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me tonight. And I'm not entirely sure that the talk I prepared is actually Dharma. I had, in fact, prepared a talk on my personal journey to becoming a bhikkhuni, partly because I'm aware that for almost every bhikkhuni that I personally know, and not all, but almost all, becoming a bhikkhuni is a very, very difficult thing. It's just not easy. I myself grew up out of sight of the Dhamma. I grew up in a place where Dharma was not taught in English that I'm aware of. I later found out, much later, that the Tibetans do teach Dharma in English in South Australia, Adelaide, but I didn't find that out till many years after I'd already discovered Buddhism. So I grew up in a very devout Catholic family, Catholic Christian, and I myself was in fact a very devout kind of person. And when I was a child, I wanted to become a Carmelite nun. Now, if any of you know anything about Christian nuns, the Carmelite nuns are the reclusive meditative order of Catholic nuns. So not only did I want to become a nun, but I wanted to become a meditating nun. When I became a teenager at around about 14 years old, I personally discovered the difference between the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of the Christian churches, and I had a very teenager sort of response to that, which was a passionate feeling of betrayal. I was extremely angry with the Christian church for betraying the teachings of Jesus in the way they implemented their religion. And I left Christianity at that time and have never looked back. For many years, I didn't have any religion. And I must say, for a religious person, that is a deeply unsettling situation. And I truly feel that any person who is born in Sri Lanka must have done something good in a past life to have been born within sight of the Dharma. Because although I searched as a teenager, at 15 or 16, I went and joined the Hare Krishnas for a little while. Like, I really was searching. I found Hinduism. I found, you know, the hallelujah, praise the Lord type Christians. I looked everywhere and I really couldn't find what I was looking for. After a while, I decided, I got married, had children, and their father left me because I was a very angry person. And no matter how hard you try and do good, if the anger in your own heart is unresolved, then it makes it very difficult for other people to work in harmony with you. But I didn't know that in those days. So I kept looking. And then I found the people that call themselves Wicca, and they are attempting to discover the original indigenous religions of Europe that existed before Christianity. And it was with them that I first learned to meditate. And when I first learned to meditate, I thought, aha, this is a very important practice. This is a very, very important practice, and I shall continue doing this for the rest of my life. My Wiccan teacher then left Adelaide for Brisbane, and so I began to look around for a new meditation teacher, and I discovered the International Suma Ching Hai Meditation Association. I practiced meditation with them for several years, and their teacher gave her talks via video because she actually lived in Taiwan. She taught Jesus's teachings, and she also taught the teachings of the Buddha. And this was the first time in my life that I had ever heard the teachings of the Buddha. And they felt quite right, but I didn't yet quite connect to them. And it's entirely possible because the teachings they taught were from a Mahayana perspective, which, whilst excellent, did not fully connect with my heart. After some years of this, I began to look for Buddhist teachings, and by this time I was working as a computer systems engineer at the university, and so had very early access to the internet. This was the mid-90s by now. And I discovered that in New South Wales, there were several Buddhist places giving Buddhist meditation retreats. And so I got on a plane and I flew from Adelaide to Sydney. And my first retreat was at a place called Wat Buddha Dhamma, which is several hours drive outside of Sydney. And subsequent retreats were in Blue Mountains Insight Meditation Centre, where they teach the Pandita style of Mahasi Buddhism and Mahasi meditation systems. I practiced Mahasi for many years, and around about 2005, there was a visiting monk called Sayadaw Ulakana, and because of his teachings and guidance, I thought, yep, it's in Buddhism that I want to become a nun. I want to start ordaining. So I began to ask around for places to train and also places to do service. I quit my job and worked as a part-time consultant so that I could go and stay at monasteries as a lay person in white, cooking for the monks, giving service to meditation retreats. I also did service at the Blue Mountains Insight Meditation Centre, and around about this time I discovered Bhante Sujato at Santacari Forest Monastery and started going there. When I was at Santacari Forest Monastery, I learned about all the preparations they were doing for the 2009 Bhikkhuni ordinations, which I enthusiastically, as a layperson who had aspirations, which I joined in helping with as much as I could. The reaction of the Thai Sangha to the 2009 Bhikkhuni ordinations in Australia was a huge shock to all of us. None of us expected the Thais to go off the way they did. It was certainly a huge shock to me. They responded as if Ajahn Brahm had done the first ever Bhikkhuni ordinations in the world. And of course, this is not true because the Sri Lankan bhikkhus had been ordaining bhikkhunis since the 1980s, as far as I know, both here in Sri Lanka, with Ayya Khema being one of the more famous, and Ayya Kusuma Bhikkhuni, and also in America. Due to that shock, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough to stand up to that kind of spotlight. And since they seem to be claiming that Bhikkhuni ordination is not necessary for attaining Nibbana, let me go and test that out for myself. Because it's also true that those very monks who say Bhikkhuni ordination is not necessary, they themselves cannot possibly know through direct experience what it is like to be a 10 precept Siladhara, Dasasila Mata, Meichi, or Sayalay. They cannot have that experience, so they cannot possibly know what it's like. So I went to Myanmar and took robes as a Sayalay and had some really excellent meditation experiences while I was there, first at Chanmei Yang, which is a Mahasi center, and then later at Pa Auk, which, well, that's his own thing, isn't it? And his teachings were, oh my goodness, how valuable, how so valuable. They changed my life, they changed my mind, they changed my heart, all for the better. But what I did discover while I was there was the difference in opportunity between the ordained Sangha who had enough food, enough medicine, enough accommodation, and the so-called not ordained nuns who did not have enough food, who did not have enough medicine, who did not have enough accommodation, who did not have access to education. For example, in Myanmar, it is illegal to give a Dhammadesana unless you have a Dharmacharya degree. For ordained Sangha, it is free to go to university and get that Dharmacharya degree. But Sayalays are not considered to be ordained Sangha, and so it is not free for them to go to university in Myanmar. And therefore, unless the Sayalay herself has wealthy parents who is able to pay for her education, then the Sayalays may never teach Dhammadesana. And as you probably know, teaching Dhammadesana is one of the ways of bringing in dayakas and supporters. So without a way of legally teaching Dhamma, they have very little way of attracting and keeping dayakas. Many of the Sayalays in Myanmar today are literally starving to death. So for some entitled ordained person to say, oh, you don't need ordination in order to be able to gain Nibbana, is clearly not true for the vast majority of individuals. It may well be true for one or two particularly outrageously special individuals, but for most of us, it is not true. So when I returned to Australia in pink, the Sangha there sort of went, why are you in your white face wearing these pink robes representing the oppression of women? Not in those words, but that's what they meant. And I went, I do not want to be representing the oppression of women. Okay, all right, I will train for Pabbaja. Will you be my teacher? No, they said, we will not. Why? Well, actually, it was a good reason, because my personality is really not suited to that particular person's personality, and it would not have been a good teacher-student combination. So I have no blame on her for that. The other problem that I faced in Australia was that apart from Santacari Monastery, there was only one other training monastery in Australia, which is Dhammasara under Ajahn Brahm, and that had and still has an age limit. At that time, you needed to be younger than 40 years old to be accepted to train there as an anagarika. At this time, I believe they've raised the age limit to 50, but still, in Newbury, which was founded in 2014, the age limit is 45. So since I was older than that, I was not prepared to ask. I actually never did ask Dhammasara if I could go and train there because my heart couldn't cope with a second no. I just wouldn't have coped. I met the Venerable Senior Bhikkhuni Ayya in the Bhikkhuni Nuns Vihara called Sangamitarama in Melbourne. And she said, yes, you may come and train with me in America. And so I got on a plane and I went to America and I trained under her and received Pabaja. It is difficult to go to America because of visa issues, but I did manage to get a 1.5 years training under her. It is, somebody has their speaker on and is coughing in my phone, in my ear. Could you please turn your speaker off, your mic off? Thank you. I was able to train under her, and for that I will be forever grateful. Due to visa issues, I went back to Australia, and that was in 2014. At that point in time, Santacari Forest Monastery had closed down temporarily, but there was nobody there and I couldn't go there, although that had been my plan. Dhammasara was completely full. And this is part of the reason they have an age limit, is because they really have very limited accommodation there and can only accommodate a small number of nuns and trainees. They were at that time raising money to build more accommodation, which they subsequently did. Newbury had just been purchased, and so Sangamitarama had closed, but Newbury was not open to accept resident nuns. So actually I didn't have anywhere to go. Bhante Sujato organised for me to stay at a Vietnamese Mahayana monastery, but I could not continue my training there because I didn't speak Vietnamese and they didn't speak English. So after a few weeks of being there, I decided to go and visit my elderly mother in Adelaide, which I did. And when I arrived there and realised that at 82, as she was, 83 as she was then, she was becoming increasingly frail and beginning to fall, have falls and such. And she was very worried that she was going to get put into a nursing home. So with nowhere else to go and being a seminary, I said, okay, Mum, I'll stay here and look after you. I promise that you will not have to go into a nursing home. I promise that you can die in your own bed. And I didn't worry about bhikkhuni ordination. I didn't think about it. I was in Brown, so nobody was going to accuse me of being supporting oppression of women. I was in Brown, that was good enough. And for me, the precepts and robes are such a great protection that I felt protected. I went to pay respects to the various bhikkhu monasteries, bhikkhus in their monasteries around Adelaide. There's quite a lot of them. And apart from the Tibetans, none of the ethnic Buddhists in Adelaide teach Dhamma in English, which is why I could not find the Dhamma. It's part of the reason why I really appreciate the the role of this organisation, because there are 2 Sri Lankan temples in Adelaide and neither of them teach Dhamma in English. And therefore, my people cannot access the Dhamma. The Thais teach in Thai, the Cambodians teach in Cambodian. Anyway, I went to visit these bhikkhus to pay respects, and Bhante Sumedha, who actually has rather good English, to be honest, he took me under his wing and began training me, which I really appreciate. He also always invited me to all of their events, and he told his community to support me. And probably 55 or 60% of my support comes from Bhante Sumedha Tero's Sri Lankan community. So thank you, Bhante. The other 40% comes from a wide variety of ethnicities, English Australians, Australian Australians, Italian Australians, Tibetan Australians, Nepalese, Thais, quite a few Malaysians and Singaporeans. So quite a diversity of different cultures is the other 40% of my support. Also, I was able to access online training from Bhante Sujato and Dharmasara, and I would visit them from time to time. That is Bhante Sujato and other places, and was able to join in with online training under Ajahn Brahm, under Ajahn Brahmali, Bhante Sujato, and also Bhikkhuni Tataloka and Bhikkhuni Sobhana and Bhikkhuni Sudama back in the United States. So pretty much the last 8 years of my training has been online. And I can't tell you how much I miss the company of other monastics, being surrounded all the time by lay people unless I visit the monks. Which is, of course, one of the major reasons I have come to Sri Lanka, is to look for some well-trained Bhikkhuni companions to bring back with me to Adelaide to both help me teach in English in Australia, so I do need them to be able to speak English, and perhaps on a more selfish level, to be a Bhikkhuni companion for me, to help me be a better Bhikkhuni. Because a lot of the training is sort of by osmosis, through being with other monks. Anyway, after several years of training online and under the guidance of the Sri Lankan bhikkhus, Bhante Mahindasara Tero from Kandy, who I will be visiting in a couple of weeks, said to me, "Nun, you should have the Upasampada." And he said he would send me to Rangiri Dambula because he felt that I was well trained, that I had a good understanding of Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, and perhaps not so much of Abhidharma Pitaka, but certainly Sutta and Vinaya. And that I understood those kinds of things. So he felt that my training was good enough for me to get the Upasampada and was going to send me to Rangiri Dambula. So I said to him, well, I'm also engaging in online training with the Australian Sangha, so I should not go off and get Upasampada without consulting them. So I contacted Bhikkhuni Upeka, who is the abbot of Newbury Forest Monastery in Melbourne, and I spoke to her about it, and she said, oh, we are organising an Upasampada under Ajahn Brahm in September. Would you like to be part of that? What do you think I said? I said, oh yes, please. I would like that very much. And she then said, well, we need letters from the bhikkhus, the Sri Lankan bhikkhus in Adelaide. We need letters from your Pavatani and Acharya in America to confirm that they also agree that you are well trained enough to deserve receiving Upasampada. And so I contacted them, and they were glad to give those references for me after testing me a little bit, naturally. Bhikkhuni Tataloka, for my great benefit and kindness, said, I will give my permission if you can find an Australian bhikkhuni to be your acharya to guide you over the next few years more closely than she is able to. And so Australian bhikkhuni Niroda agreed to do that for me, and so I was able to get the Upasampada under Ajahn Brahm in 2016. Since then, I've been living and working in Adelaide to the best of my ability, trying to do as much bhavana as I can, trying to read the suttas and teach the people. I thought it might be useful also to share with you some of the things that I have focused on over the last few years, because I'm not in a forest monastery, and you probably all know this, it is more difficult to meditate in the city than it is in the forest. It is more difficult to practice in amongst a group of lay people than it is amongst a group of ordained meditators. It's just a fact. It's just my experience anyway. Perhaps you share it, I don't know. So I thought, well, I will focus as well on applying this precious Dhamma to the everyday life. How can we make this moment a kusala chitta moment? How can we make this current challenge that hits me? How can I respond in a way that the Buddha would approve of, rather than responding in a way the Buddha would disapprove of? Because it seems to me that no matter what you do or how you control it, the world is not under our control. The world will always do things that we don't like. People will always do things that we don't like. There will always be people who disagree with us. There will always be somebody who wants to shout at you or tell you you're wrong or disagree with you. So, excuse me, my Zoom mic just fell off. Okay. So I looked very carefully through the suttas and looked at the Buddha's guidance, and I was particularly found useful both Dvaita Vitakka Sutta and the 5 ways of dealing with terrible thoughts, which I think is the Vitakka Santana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 19 and 20. And in the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta, the Buddha says there are 2 kinds of thoughts. There are kusala thoughts and there are akusala thoughts. There's yoniso manasikara and ayoniso manasikara. And he then talked about how he, when he was still a bodhisattva, so before he was an arahant, had practiced in meditation, and probably out of meditation too, but certainly in meditation, identifying what kind of thought arose or what kind of mental state arose. And when they are subtle, it can be extremely difficult to identify whether what is in your heart right at this very moment is kusala or akusala. What is the state of my heart right now? Is it beneficial to me and to others, or is it harmful to me and to others? And this is a really tricky thing, because the mind will trick us and it will tell us lies. It tells us lies like, this irritation I'm feeling is a good thing because it will help me get what I need done. And that's a lie. Because this irritation that I'm feeling is not a good thing. It is small anger. Now, big anger is much more obvious, right? But when it's little anger, like mildly irritated, it's so easy to dismiss that as not important, as not worth worrying about. But the problem is, as soon as the world pokes you, you know, the traffic is too thick, somebody disagrees with you, somebody crashes into your car, somebody breaks into your house, as soon as the world is unpleasant, that little irritation will be fed by the adrenaline spike and turn into anger in a split second before you even know it. And then all of a sudden you are overwhelmed with anger and you are saying unwholesome things and doing unwholesome things. Yet, if your heart hadn't been irritated in the first place, then that big explosion would not have happened. Just contrast, if you were in a situation bad, really happy, you were feeling very peaceful, and then that same annoying thing happened. Well, the adrenaline would still kick in. But that happiness, that kindness, that peacefulness would then be what would become big. And so going from little happiness, it would go to big happiness. And then you wouldn't say anything harmful and you wouldn't do anything harmful. And so this is why in some cases, you know, when a terrible thing happens, say a bomb or a terrorist or a robber or a car crash, some people are responding with kindness and compassion, and some people are having hysterics and getting angry. Why? Because the person who responded with kindness already had a kusala chitta before the car crash, before the terrible thing happened. The person who's responding in hysterics or anger already had an akusala chitta that got amplified. So if you would guard yourself against having a negative reaction, then we need to learn how to identify those really, really subtle akusala chittas. And they do hide themselves from us. And they do trick us into thinking that they're okay. One akusala chitta that I've seen many women have and think that it's actually a good thing is worry. So they say, oh, I'm so worried about my relative, blah, 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 blah. But what it is actually, I'm fearful that I will experience pain if something bad happens to them. The person being worried about experiences it as, you don't trust me to be able to look after myself. This is why I call it akusala, because the effect it has is harmful. The person who is worrying is spending all of their time imagining terrible imaginary things happening in the future that never happened, and therefore thinking, oh my goodness, that this pain might happen in the future, I better give myself a whole bunch of pain now. And then all of the people they interact with have to deal with their pain, have to deal with their fear, have to deal with their akusala chitta. But what their intention was for people to think that they cared about them. So their intention was to show that they cared, but their actual result was to say, I don't trust. I don't have confidence that you can take care of yourself. I don't have confidence that I can take care of myself. I don't have confidence that I'll cope with potential future pain. So how do we deal with, say, just worry, right? Well, we have to identify worry as a type of vicikiccha. It's a type of skeptical doubt. And what should we have faith in? We should have faith in the Dhamma. We should have faith that we are a good person and we can do a good karma and not a bad karma. We should have faith that we have trained our loved ones, we have helped our loved ones such that they are competent and capable people, able to take care of themselves, able to take care of their karma, able to do good deeds. And we should say, I trust you, my loved one. But remember, if anything bad happens, I'm here to help you. You can always call on me. Because I've also seen people in problem situations not calling on their relatives because they say, I can't tell my mother, my sister, my auntie, I can't tell my mother this thing is happening because she will become overwhelmed with worry. So I cannot call on her for help. Now, this is the complete opposite of what we wanted to achieve through our worrying, wasn't it? Through our worrying, we wanted to keep our loved ones safe, but what we did was project so much fear that our loved ones are afraid to trigger that fear in us, and so they will not ask us for help from fear of triggering our worry. This is how tricky it is to identify what is kusala and what is akusala within our own hearts and minds, yeah? I'll tell you the story of 2 car crashes. Back when I was still driving. When I was a Samaneri, I still drove to take my mum around. And on 2 separate occasions, when I was driving, I was rear-ended by another car. On the first occasion, I had just returned from the United States, where I had been diagnosed with a certain medical condition, and they said to me, it will cost $150,000 for this treatment. And I said, oh, I think I'll go home to Australia. When I got home to Australia, they said, oh yes, you can have this treatment for free. Thank you. So I was on my way to this treatment thinking, wow, how lucky I am to be an Australian. I am so glad that I'm not an American. Wow, how lucky, lucky, lucky I am. And bang, into the back of my car, smashed this other car. I was stopped at the red light. I have no idea why they just didn't stop, but they didn't. And I was so happy that I'm like, oh, well, nobody's hurt. That's okay, nobody's injured. This is what insurance is for. And everything was good. So a small great gratitude, amplified into a big gratitude. And I got quite excited, but you know, you do get excited when all that adrenaline's rushing through you. About a year or so later, I was taking my mother to a large family lunch. And I was feeling very slightly anxious about a couple of family members. Not very anxious. In fact, so slightly anxious that I hadn't noticed I was a little bit worried. Little bit worried is little fear. And I had not identified that fear. I was not mindfully aware that fear was present. And when I stopped behind another car who was turning right, and another vehicle slammed into the back of me, that little fear turned into big fear. And when I get afraid, unfortunately, I get angry. Or I used to anyway. I still get a bit angry, but not as bad as I used to, fortunately for me. And I was furious with the other driver for endangering the life of my mother. And I hopped out this car intending to scold this person. And the driver behind that person who slammed into them looked at me and said, you know, anger's not very helpful. And I went, wow, thank you. Phew, saved. Saved, thank you very much. And he looked very surprised that I immediately turned it off like that, which I did. Oops. Phew. But I was really determined to understand, why had I got so angry? Why did that anger arise? This is not a suitable response for a good Buddhist person, and I don't want to have this response again. And so for a very long time after that, I reviewed what happened, what was going on. And because I'd had the two crashes, I kind of really reviewed what was the state of my mind, what was the series of cause and effect, you know, like a row of dominoes knocking each other down. And that's when I realized that the very mild anxiety or worry that I had in my heart, unidentified, before the crash, was the cause of that amplification into anger. That the kusala citta of gratitude and appreciation and joy was the reason that in that crash I got grateful that nobody was injured and that I was happy that we were all safe, and I didn't get angry at all. And yet they were pretty much two identical situations. So now, if I'm going into a challenging situation, I'm very, very careful to check what is present in my heart. Is my heart full of, have any tiny little bit of fear, any tiny little bit of concern, any tiny little bit of worry? And if it does, then I really need to bring up some compassion for me. Compassion, because that's having an akusala citta, an unwholesome heart, is painful. It's unpleasant. Nobody enjoys it. Not truly. And so I begin with compassion for me. Because in the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta, the Buddha says, have compassion. Bring up compassion. Or is it? No, I think it's the simile of Saul. Simile of the Saul. Where he talks about people arguing and how to prevent getting angry when somebody argues with you. And he talks about bringing up compassion, and from compassion then moving to loving kindness and spreading loving kindness to everyone, above and below, around and everywhere, beginning with the person who is in front of you. So I practiced this a lot. I imagined myself in various difficult situations and bringing up compassion for myself and then compassion for the other person. And this really, really paid off the day that a robber walked into my bedroom at night. Now, many people, many women, have been told that if an intruder should come in, that the best thing they should do is scream. But I'm going to ask you to consider whether that's actually true. Because if you scream at an ordinary, normal, decent person, do you think the chances of having a negative response from that screaming is possible? Yes, I think so. What about screaming at a criminal? What's the chances that a criminal, a bad person, will cope in a peaceful and calm way with you screaming at them? Pretty much zero. So personally, I strongly believe that screaming at an intruder is a really, really unwise thing to do, because it's more likely to goad them into being violent. But I had been practicing and practicing and practicing. If something happens that I don't like, bring up compassion and then bring up kindness. So when I saw this very degraded looking person, you know, the kind of person who doesn't get a lot to eat on a very regular basis over a very long period of time, and how they kind of look a bit shriveled. Well, this person had that look about him, about someone who regularly and frequently didn't get enough to eat. In other words, probably dangerous. And I didn't even have to have compassion for me. Immediately, I just looked at them and thought, oh, you poor thing. Oh, how sad for you that even in Australia, you can't earn a living. Even in Australia, you can't get enough money to find something to eat. Oh, you poor man. You poor man. And with a heart full of compassion, because he must be in a terrible situation to have to go into a stranger's house in the middle of the night. Feeling such compassion for him, I looked him in the eye and I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, um, I'm lost," he said. And I thought, oh my, in so many ways, the Dhamma path is so far from you. You poor man, you are so lost. And with a kind of half laugh, half smile, I said to him, "But why are you lost in my house?" And he said, "I'm hungry." Oh, you poor man. I said, "Oh, well, the food's in the kitchen, dear. Come on, I'll take you to the kitchen. Come along, come along." And I opened the pirikara cupboard, because even in Australia, we get given a little bit too much pirikara, more than we can eat. So it gets stored in the cupboard, and then periodically I take it down and give it to the poor people, because we do have poor people in Australia too. Anyway, it was a while since I'd taken it down to the homeless shelter. So I had plenty of food there, and I was filling it up. And I'm like, "Oh, hello, my name is Venerable Santacari. What's your name?" And he told me his name. I said, this is getting very heavy. Would you like some help to carry it? And he said, no, I only live in such and such a place. And I knew exactly which place he meant. Thank you. Now I have your name and address. Just because I'm coping doesn't mean to say somebody else will cope. So with the armfuls of food, he left peacefully. And then we contacted the police and let them know. They were completely aware of exactly who he was, and he had been breaking into houses all over the area, and they went down to arrest him because I told him where they lived, and they said, thank you for that information. He said, we have enough actual theft victims to identify him, so we probably won't need your testimony. I said, that's great. He said, do you want to file a report for breaking? It's all right. He left without doing a bad karma. It's okay. A few days later, the police rang us and told us he's now in jail because he was involved in a stabbing. Can you see how the Dhamma kept me safe? If I had screamed at that man, if I had got angry at that man, I would have been the one stabbed. If I had yelled at him or scolded him, I would have been the one stabbed. But because I applied the Buddha's Dhamma in the moment, in the daily life, the Dhamma kept me safe. And I have a great teaching story now. So I thank you for listening to me, and I should stop fiddling with this mic unless it... And I guess I should open the floor for questions. Does anybody online have questions? I think there's a couple of chat questions.
Bhikkhuni is willing to take questions.
Yes, I am. There's...
Wondering whether this, now that this is not working,
Oh, okay.
If it's
I'm
not
doing
powered by it, it would be more
Oh, I
helpful to
see,
hear
right. Of course.
Yeah.
No power, no thing. I could have just talked up, you know. I've got quite a loud voice.
Anuja.
I have a question. I'm going to speak louder and do that shouting so that it will be clear. Now, Bhikkhuni, thank you very much for that very practical talk about how we should observe our minds so that we keep our minds in kusala chitta rather than akusala chitta. And also you refer to various practical situations where it's so important to kind of manage our minds. Now, I have to say that I too observe my mind in a state of irritation very often, and I keep observing it. And I'm very happy that you explained that if the background of the mind is in irritation, then it can go into anger very fast. So I just want to say that I think all of you in the audience and everyone here, listening to the news that's going on currently, where innocent people are being slaughtered in the Gaza Strip, and to date 17,000 civilians have been killed since October 7th. And I have to say that I was a United Nations humanitarian aid worker, and up to date, 160 UN officials have been killed in the Gaza. So when I listen to this kind of news, it is something that causes all the negative emotions. And I've been trying my best to practice compassion towards Netanyahu plus Biden, who are the people who are responsible for what's happening today. So I'd like some practical advice from you as to how I can turn my mind into Kusala Chitta in this kind of situation that we are facing.
Thank you very much. For those online that didn't hear the question was, considering the situation in the Gaza Strip where so many thousands of innocent people and innocent aid workers have been slaughtered, and the distress that comes up in the heart and mind when hearing this, could we have some practical advice on assisting with that? Is that correct? Yes. I'm going to return to the simile of the saw, Majjhima Nikaya 21, where the Buddha gives us this little recitation. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes. I will discuss Majjhima Nikaya 21, the simile of the saw, where the Buddha discusses how to manage when things are difficult. In that particular situation, it was people arguing, but it's also here. So he says, to recite to yourself, my mind will remain unshaken. And starting with those perpetrators, I will bring up compassion and I will radiate loving kindness over the entire world. But sometimes that doesn't work, right? Sometimes we think, oh, reciting, my mind will remain unshaken, and it's shaking like crazy. And the grief and the loss comes up. Now, sometimes compassion isn't working for us. And so then we need to turn to equanimity, upekkha. This is, unfortunately, the way that samsara is. This kind of suffering, and if you remember when the Buddha spoke to Patachara after her whole family had died in one night, her 2 baby sons, her husband, her family in the burned down house. And he reminded her that each and every one of us has shed more tears than would fill the entire ocean in the rounds of samsara. That the suffering of beings is unending. And this is not to not care. Of course we care. And of course we should send whatever help we can and do whatever help we can do. But when there is absolutely nothing more that we can do about it, then we have to actually just remember that this is the nature of samsara, that wars are part of the nature of samsara, that many of those people in the Gaza Strip never had the opportunity to access the Dhamma because of the religion they were born into. I truly wish for those innocent people, those innocent non-human beings, because there's birds and dogs and other beings also murdered and killed. May all those beings who have lost their lives, may they have fortunate rebirth in sight of the Dhamma. And I can only wish for them to have a fortunate rebirth so that in their next life, they let go of hating each other. They are so bound up in that area, they are so attached to hating their enemies that they appear to be reborn next to their enemies so that they can hate them next life and the life after. I totally wish for them, with true compassion, that they will one day be able to let go of their hate, because this situation will never end, because hatred never ends through hatred. Through love alone does hatred end. I could wish that they would learn that Gata alone. But I know that they will not. They will not change their mind. They will not change the way they see the world. They will not change their view. And so I have to come back again to upekkha. This is the nature of samsara. It has always been like this and will always be like this. We are very fortunate that so many good people have done so many good things, and particularly the people in the United Nations have done so much since the Second World War in the prevention and suppression of outbreaks of war. But despite their best efforts, they cannot change human nature. Even the Blessed Buddha himself could not change human nature. During the Buddha's lifetime, he prevented and suppressed many wars in North India. But as soon as he passed away, despite the teachings being there, those wars immediately broke out.
I think in the time of the Buddha, correct me if I'm wrong, the Kolyas and the Shakyans, his maternal side of his family and his father's side of the family, were warring over a river.
That's correct.
Over the water. So the Buddha intervened and stopped it. It flared up again, he intervened and stopped it.
This is correct.
The third time it flared up, he didn't do it, and it caused a lot of lives lost. And he was there. There was nothing more he could do, and he didn't do it. And you will understand anatta, that there is little control over things. And of course, the footnote, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, they say that most of those who died were stream enterers. I don't know whether they were caught in the crossfires or whether they were actually fighting, whether they must have not been if they were stream enterers, I'm thinking. But that is mentioned, I don't know, in some sutta.
Okay. And there were other times when he talked kings out of it as well. So yes, but back to our own hearts. When that pain arises in your heart, part of it is wishing that it could be some other way, that it shouldn't be like this. But that's just not true. Shoulda, coulda, woulda just doesn't matter in reality, right? Good people do the best we can. But at some point, we can do no more. And to stab yourself with the dagger saying it should be like this, it should be like this, it shouldn't be like this, is not helpful. So the next time that pain arises, perhaps just do some mindfulness of body. Take your mind off the mental topic. Take your mind off the papancha, right? Off the mental proliferation of, oh, it shouldn't be like this. What can we do? How can we stop this? Which just digs the dagger in your heart again and again. And bring your mind onto your body. Maybe you can even do mindfulness of Vedana. This is painful. This is painful. Yeah? And take your mind off the topic. Try and reduce the amount of thinking you do about it, because that will not help you and it will not help them. Certainly, send them relief, send them aid, send peacekeepers, do everything we can do. But when that is exhausted, stop thinking about it. Don't think about it. Don't stab yourself with verbal daggers. And when the pain is there, that grief, that pain and grief of the loss of all those innocent lives, it's not their fault, then we have to say, my mind will remain unshaken and I will radiate loving kindness for them and wish them a happy rebirth. Is this a helpful answer for you?
Yes, thank you very much. I have been trying to practice loving kindness meditation. But the thing is that the continuation of the problem, and each day you hear more and more horrific stories, so the thing is getting rehabilitated all the time.
Exactly. So stop listening to all from metta if it's not working and go to upekkha. My mind will remain unshaken. I will not get upset. Which asks, what do you mean by upasampada? And I apologize for all the Pali words I've been throwing around, and mention that upasampada is the higher ordination. I had a Sayalay 10 precept ceremony, 8 precept ceremony. And then I had Pabaja, which is the novice or Samaneri 10 precept ordination. And then in 2016, I took the 311 Bhikkhuni precepts in a higher ordination, which is called Upasampada. And on the topic of the number of precepts, I don't know, shall I share a Bhikkhuni joke with you? Okay. The joke, it's only a joke because it's sort of kind of ish true, but not really. So if 5 precepts is better than no precepts, and 8 precepts is better than 5, and 10 is better than 8, and 227, the bhikkhu precepts, is better than 10 precepts, I've got 300